Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 24th of June Council meeting. If you don't mind standing for the acknowledgement of country, diversity commitments and service acknowledgement and prayer. I'd first like to acknowledge that the City of Victor Harbor acknowledges the Ramangeri and the Narrandjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land and surrounding waters where we live and where we work. We acknowledge their deep connection to country and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And this respect extends to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders all along Australia.
The City of Victor Harbor is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. We respect people of all ages, abilities, genders, sexualities, religions, beliefs, cultures and backgrounds.
We recognise the brave individuals who have served and continue to serve our nation. We remember those who've lost their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice to our country.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of the city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name and the welfare of the people who it may serve. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. It's lovely to see so many people in the gallery. And a couple of announcements just quickly. You might not have heard that Victor Harbor is taking on the finish for the stage 4 of the Tour Down Under next year, which got announced this morning. So that's a big bit of kudos for our town. We'll be able to see some of the world's best cyclists across our finish line. And it's the 25th anniversary of the Tour Down Under. And I was just reflecting when we were saying the diversity commitment, we had a really large citizenship ceremony here last week, and there were people from all over the world, including Hong Kong and Singapore and Taiwan, from Eritrea, the Sudan, as well as British citizens, all becoming citizens of Victor Harbor. So it's lovely that we are such a diverse community and welcome people of all sexualities, religions, beliefs, cultures into our family. We now have items adjourned and lying on the table, and we had an item that was adjourned by Councillor Schiller, and so I might look for Councillor Schiller to move that item. Thank you. And it's the revised recommendation there on your agenda, Councillor Schiller, that Council approve the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority draft annual budget and long-term financial plan as provided under separate cover. Would you like to, you happy to move that way? Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to that?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson? No? Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Burns?
I applaud the board for trying to improve the management of their costs and some of the reductions that they've been able to achieve and proposing for the next financial year. I still have concerns about 3 areas in this budget. One is that the solar to address their power costs, their asset renewals are not included in the budget, and also a concern that the board are reluctant to pursue any initiatives to improve profitability and reduce costs. If those 3 areas were actually addressed, then I'd be supportive of this, but without that, I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Any further discussion? Councillor Corembo?
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe Councillor Schiller might be able to shed a little bit of light. The board had considered 2 initiatives as an amendment to current service offerings with a view to improve profitability, but it was against the, what was it, strategic goal. Is this one of the strategic goals to actually become sort of cash neutral, or is this always going to be a service?
Councillor Schiller, are you happy to answer that? Otherwise, I will perhaps ask one of the directors to answer that, or the CEO.
I think Kelly can appropriately answer that because she is obviously the acting executive of the Aquatic Centre currently.
Thank you. Kelly, are you happy to answer that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. So the board did consider 2 new initiatives to look at ways to improve the bottom line, essentially, of the Aquatic Centre. So one was introducing a 24 gym. There were a number of issues that needed to have more consideration of that before it could be presented, including competitive neutrality issues with other existing offerings within the area, and security and access to the site. So in terms of that particular item, it was considered, because of security, that it may be better to await till the new wellbeing area was developed adjacent to provide a bit more security and access for a 24/7 gym. In regards to the other item, which it was the removal of the creche service. So the creche doesn't serve a large volume of the members. There's probably only about 20 to 30 families that use that particular service. But taking that away would have a big impact on those families and other people that use that service on a casual basis. So the board considered that taking that away at this stage needed more consideration, but instead of taking that service away, looking to expand the delivery, the existing service in terms of allowing more casuals to use it, so that people with young children can still have exercise and use the facilities, as well as looking at whether or not the space could be divided up and used for other external providers a little bit more as well. So there's a couple of other options that are being investigated rather than just those 2 as presented.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Crimby, you have another question?
Yeah, I do. So 30 families that use it, is it a free service or do they pay for that service?
So through the Mayor, it's only for members at the moment, and so it's included in their membership, and it only runs for a couple of hours, I believe, during the day. So it's specific times, and the rest of the time the staff are either diverted into the life-saving, looking after the pool or other activities. So it does need to be expanded, I believe, and that is what the board was looking at, but taking away the service in full at this point in time wasn't seen to be a good community outcome.
Okay, just another question, and you can take this on notice. Can we get a cost of what it actually costs to service this community for the creche? You don't have to tell me now. You can tell me.
Through the Mayor, yeah, I can have a look at that. It will be a reasonably high level because it will come from the management YMCA. So, but I can provide that.
Okay. And one last question. There's an allocation of $60,000 in the capital budget for accessibility improvements, which improve compliance. Were these compliance issues not addressed during the construction of the building?
So through the Mayor, we had an accessibility audit done last year. I think it was early last year, and so we've been working through those in terms of what could be adjusted. Some of the things could be design elements that could have been done differently, but according to basically the people that use the facility, these are improvements to enhance their visit to the centre, including some easier signage and access, removing some of the things like currently there's some bike racks that actually impede one of the walkways, and removing those and putting them elsewhere so that there's no tripping hazards or things like that.
Yep.
And also looking at some of the signage within the centre and making the entrance more visible.
Yeah, I'm just asking because removing some signs and some bike racks, $60,000 seems like a lot of money. It sounds like there's some major works that need to be done.
Yes, through the Mayor, some of those costs are also installing additional tactiles to assist with wayfinding for people that find it difficult to access the front door. There's a big long list of items, including signage, lighting, covering the the existing veranda that comes out the front that is actually open to the elements, so as well. So there's a big long list that have come out of that accessibility audit, and these are the things that the board felt could be done within this type of budget without needing dramatic more strategic decisions longer term for the building.
Okay. Would we be able to get as elected members a list of all those things that are going to be done for the, is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further debate or any further questions? Councillor Kemp.
Basically, it's a bit disappointing with the disability access to have a board to know about the problems, and this has been a problem for many years, not just new to the Aquatic Centre, and it's taken so long to take action. I think both councils should send a direct message to the board to lift your game, because really it's poor performance. Because when you get members of the community coming up to you saying, we have our spot in our disability spa pool, we have to wait, there's no chairs to sit on, they're disabled, etc., things like that, which I think is very poor. And they have made complaints to the management of the area, but no, nothing's been changed, nothing's been done. The board's not aware of it by the sounds of it. So again, it's disappointing that the board has not progressed any further than it has in the last 2 years. In saying that, our council contributes $77,775,000 a year, and with 2 councils, that's $1.5 million we're pouring back into that aquatic centre. I know it's good for the community, it's well-being, but only 1,000 or 1,200 people use that out of 28, 30, 40,000 in 2 council areas. Again, all we ask of these subsidiaries to actually work hard to bring towards a break even. We're not asking to make profits, we just want to bring a break even and actually provide a good service to the community in all areas. Especially disability is one of the biggest things that pool has been having trouble with ever since it was opened up with disability access. So I won't be supporting this because I think that we're still paying too much money. There's no productivity. There's no reduced expenditure in the demands in the operating budget. The electricity, which is the biggest expense of that centre, there's no plans in place for that to happen straight away in this financial year. I don't have the long-term financial plan in this document, which I've got, so I can't talk to that. So I had no information there to look at when that solar panel system is going to come into play. So I just think that by not voting for this and not accepting it, we'll send a message back to the board to get their act together.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. You'll be closing the debate if you speak now, Councillor Schiller. Does anybody else want to speak or have any questions? Councillor Schiller, would you like to close the debate?
I would like to just say that I believe our board has done a significant research into disability access within the facility. There is more that could be done in the future, which is being looked at a more strategic level. We haven't just picked this randomly. We've had many meetings about it, and although the facility, when built, was compliant, this is about access and inclusion, and that's a step above what compliance is. So I feel comfortable that we have done the best that we could do.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. That closes the debate. All those in favour of the recommendation? And those against? That means I need to do the casting vote, and I will vote in favour of the recommendation. I think that council need to look at the increase in fees and charges which have been recommended. I know from what Councillor Schiller has said that, and the responses given by Kelly, that the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre is doing everything that it can to raise money, to do funds. It is a very difficult economic time. Electricity costs have increased and they are going beyond just compliance, but looking at inclusion and how they can increase participation. So I'm voting for that recommendation. we move to
Point of order.
8.1.
I think councillor Burns called a division.
You called a division? I
Yeah.
beg your pardon, I didn't hear you. All those, beg your pardon? All those in favour, please stand. That is Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Quinton and Councillor Henderson. Those against, Councillor Burns, Councillor Koremba, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Schofield. I've made a casting vote in favour. The motion is carried. We now move on to item 8, the petition in relation to the Encounter Community Centre. Sorry, where have we got? Okay. Not labelled. Sorry, minutes of the previous meeting, and the recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 27th of May be confirmed as true and correct. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Burns, seconding Councillor Schofield. Does anybody have any questions in relation to the minutes? I'll put that to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. There are no deputations and there are no questions from the gallery. So we move on to petitions. We have a recommendation that council receive and note the petition from the Encounter Community Centre report and attachment, which are under a separate cover. So this is just receiving and noting. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconding, Councillor Schofield. Don't think that there's any discussion in relation to receiving and noting, unless there's anything particular that either of you would like to say. No. Does anybody want to say anything about receiving and noting? Councillor Burns?
Just a question. With the petition signatories, I was just looking at the council's privacy policy. Did that, the fact that it had names and addresses and signatures rather than being redacted, which is on page 5 of the council's privacy policy. I was just wondering, did that comply or?
Victoria? Can you respond to that?
And it can be on notice if you need time to.
Usually petitions do have the addresses or signatures. We're required to meet the requirements of the petition, and it's a public petition.
Yep.
So, but again, I'm happy to provide clarification of that otherwise.
Okay. I was just checking in case.
There's no further questions. I'll put it to the floor that council receive and note the petition. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.1 is outstanding resolutions, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report for June. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Thank you. Do either of you want to speak to that or have any questions about the outstanding resolutions? Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Burns, then Councillor Koremba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few questions about a couple of the resolutions. On page 24, resolution OC 382020. This has been on there for quite a while, and I believe that administration have bent over backwards trying to get some response and submissions from the Investigator College. I think if they're not going to respond, this should just be removed.
Jodie, do you want to respond to that one?
Sure.
Yes, through the Mayor. We haven't bent over backwards. We've had multiple meetings with the school, and the outcome is that the school are developing a master plan. So it's still a resolution of council. If council want to rescind the resolution, we'd need to put a report up to council.
The other is on resolution OC 222023. Still awaiting progression of the project. I'm just wondering why. Some of the other projects were mentioned at previous meeting, that a lot of the staff are focused on the sports precinct. I would have thought, you know, all these projects would also be of equal importance. Just trying to understand what's taking so long in looking at suitable locations. Now, it could be the garden groups, whatever, are not happy with what's being proposed, but it just seems to be taking a long time.
Thank you through the mayor. We have been looking at suitable locations and a potential co-location with another unsolicited proposal.
Okay.
So it has been proceeding. That's coming back to council members for a workshop in August.
Thank you. The other is on page 25, resolution OC 4132023. Given this isn't a council road, I feel quite strongly that the cost should be borne by the state government, not ratepayers of Victor Harbor, if that proceeds.
Is that a question?
Well, it's probably a statement.
A statement? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
The other is OC 4582023. Again, and I'm happy to put up a motion on this. I just think that a detailed design plan should be held off, given we are in the long-term financial plan 10 years away from doing a art and culture. We've got other priorities, other projects that, you know, that amount of money could be utilised next year better. So I've just got concerns about that. And again, happy to put up a motion at the next meeting in that regard.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Burns, was
Sure.
that OC 4582023, the Arts and Cultural Centre Stage 1?
Yes, so that, well, I understand that's separate from the staircase and separate from the fire.
No, that is, because it says the revised plans have been lodged and basically Stage 1 detailed design has been awarded and has commenced. So
Okay.
that's
So-
actually underway, and which it also incorporates those staircase, and those works are underway.
I understood that it was separate. So there was work being done in the fire compliance and the external
was-
staircase.
No, it was part and parcel of that resolution in terms of incorporating that as part of that part 1.
Okay. The other was on page 26, resolution OC 112024, which is the last item, the draft urban stormwater management plan. Just looking at a time frame, trying to understand what's the delay in that.
So through the mayor, the delay has been fixing a date with the SES who are providing the training for free.
Yep.
And we have fixed a date and it's actually advertised on our website now.
Okay, that's all right.
It happened since we wrote this report.
Thank you. That was it.
Thank you, councillor Karembo.
Thank you, Mayor. My question regarding OC 302024, it's to do with some of the compliance, the electrical compliance issues that have been addressed. Can we have a list of what is actually being addressed? Is that all right?
Happy to provide that to members in the EM update. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions, councillor Kemp?
On the same resolution, if I heard correctly, it has commenced the upgrade of the fire safety provisions in the building, and any timelines as to when they'll be completed and what provisions are in place to protect users while the upgrades are happening.
Well, the same provisions that have always been in place because it is compliant under the building fire safety requirements. So in terms of the works, I can get some further information in regards to the progress of those works for you.
You can pop that in the elected members update as well. Thank you. Are there any further questions in relation to the outstanding resolutions? If not, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.2 is the review of the complaint handling policy. And just to reiterate that this is not related to the council member behaviour management policy and the complaint policy, but this relates to any community members wanting to complain about services or staff or anything that's council related. So the recommendation I will do on block that council adopt the reviewed complaint handling policy, and that recommendation 2 that council receive and note the procedure and unreasonable complainant conduct management procedure. Would someone like to move 1 and 2 on block? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and Councillor Schofield seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Karemba and then Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Has there been an increase in complaints from the public from, say, 12 months, 24 months ago? Is there a trend where we're trending up, down, indifferent?
No, nothing that alerts me that there's been a change or an increase, but I'm happy to look at some statistics to give you an indication of what we're comparing it to.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I am supporting this and I understand what the changes are trying to achieve. My only concern, and I'll be looking for some sort of reassurance, is that this could be used by administration to suppress community complaints. If everything goes well, this will work well, but it could, and I just need assurances that that won't occur.
Can you, I'm interested, Councillor Burns, can you tell me how it could be used by administration to suppress community complaints?
Probably in the determination where complaints coming in could not be identified as falling into a number of categories that they may actually not be in. So it's subjective assessments, and that's my only concern, is there may be some valid complaints coming in that may it's just subjective, and if that is handled properly, there's no issue, but there's a risk there. And not saying that this administration would do it, but you may get a administration that could use that, and that's what worries me. There doesn't seem to be enough.
Which specific part of the process of the procedure are you worried
in
about?
the determination of the complaint.
The determination
Yeah,
of the
correct.
complaint.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't relate to anything that's been submitted. It's just that it could, and that's what worries me, just to make sure that people are confident, even if there was a dispute process where they could challenge, I'd feel more comfortable.
Sure.
There's just a determination being made, and it's not when a lot of complaints are raised, the mayor and the CEO will assess them, and that's a fair assessment as to whether they're vexatious or not. In here, it can be more subjective, and that is a bit of a worry, that's all.
Might let the CEO respond to that. She might be able to answer your concern.
I guess just to reiterate any concerns that you do have, obviously all complaints are taken seriously and addressed. Members of the community have access or ability to actually refer their complaints to an elected member to ensure that they are administered appropriately. And also, if the member of the community is not happy with an outcome, they can request a Section 270 review, which is a request to review the decision of the administration or of the council or of their complaint and how it was reviewed. If they're still not happy with that, they can actually submit it to the Ombudsman, who would then also seek to have a review of how their complaint was handled and addressed by the administration. So I believe there are a number of mechanisms for the community to have confidence, and also to elected members to have confidence that we would address any complaints seriously and appropriately.
There any further questions or discussion in relation to the recommendation? Councillor Henderson, did you want to close the debate? I'll put this to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to 9.3, which is the fees and charges register amendment. And that the recommendation is that council adopt the amended 2024-25 fees and charges provided at attachment A for you. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. And seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Mackenzie, do you want to speak to this? No, Councillor Henderson? Does anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. Why are there so many TBCs in there to be considered, I'm assuming?
Because they are usually legislative fees and charges. We have to wait for them to be or come through via gazettals.
Okay.
So the only change, obviously members may not have picked up, is there was one page that was missing that was presented to members. So there's no other changes other than obviously the addition of the page. But the TBCs are those that are advised by Dog and Cat Management Board or other pieces of legislation.
And are indications that they may increase this year? Is a trend?
I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay,
So
that's right.
I don't really know, but we'll advise members as soon as we do hear.
If there's nothing else, I'll put this, Councillor Kemp.
On the fees and charges of the precinct across the road, just a question for the CEO. The fees and charges are here now for the court hire of the basketball and also the gymnastic area. Will council be working hard with the new precinct developers to maintain those prices at the same price? If they're not going to be...
Sorry, Councillor Kemp, point of order. This is about the current recommendation. We'll talk about the new precinct later on.
This is about the fees and charges, Mayor.
The fees and charges for the new precinct isn't.
No, for the current basketball courts, will they be the same for the new precinct? That's all the question I'm asking.
New precinct hasn't been built.
Yeah, these fees and charges what they currently sit within the 24-25 budget obviously won't be relevant because it won't be built by then, will be built after then. But in terms of your question, obviously the council is negotiating around those fees and charges to be held so they can be as consistent. They can't promise that they'd be exactly the same.
If I ask to view your crystal ball, CEO, if the fees and charges in the new precinct are not as the same as
Councillor
fees.
Kemp, point of order. These concern the fees and charges for 24-25. The precinct hasn't been built. More than happy to discuss the fees and charges for the precinct at an appropriate time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Are there any further questions, Councillor Corimba?
Just a question regarding your statement about an appropriate time. Is that in confidence?
It will depend on what is being discussed. There are some things that are in confidence. Most of the things that we've been talking about, the public are aware of in terms of what we are able to see.
Okay, I'll be specific. Will the fees and charges that the precinct will be charging the basketball community, will they be held in confidence?
Councillor Corimba, the recommendation relates to fees and charges in the 24-25.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, we're not discussing the precinct at this point in time. Are there any further relevant questions to the recommendation? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10 is the market policy and guidelines. And I'd like to thank Mark Prisabilla, who has met with all of the markets and the market managers and spent quite a long time talking to them. And I received some feedback, and I've got asked to thank you very much from the market manager at the Victor Harbour Farmers Market. And the recommendation is that council adopt the market policy and market guidelines as provided at attachment A and B. Would someone like to thank you very much, Councillor Schiller, and seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that, Councillor Schiller?
We workshopped this, and I think we've made some alterations that makes it a bit more palatable, and yeah, it's a good document.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Does anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Corimba and Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just had an email from one of the market operators. There was some questions regarding similarity of goods that are for sale. That prohibits them from selling, sorry, there's a rule in there, I think it prohibits them from selling goods that are sold in shops currently, is that correct?
Can you be more specific, Councillor Corimba?
Well, I don't know, if there's a brand of something sold in a shop in the main street, then the market can't sell the same thing. Is that one of the rules?
I'll ask Mark Priscilla to respond to that. I'm not quite sure that that's exactly correct.
So through the Mayor, there is a reference on page 86, halfway down, that does talk to that. I've spoken to the market operator you're alluding to today, just to reassure them that that's the intention is more so around the wholesale display of items. So it's not if one or two things are competing, because one of the comments that came back from particularly two of the markets, they were concerned about where there might be stall holders that exist that actually directly compete. But also there's been some feedback from businesses about just the risks of that. The attachment here is our guidelines, so they're not actually prescriptive per se, but I do agree that probably prohibits is the wrong word. Maybe discourage is probably a better word to use. Regardless, any license agreement would come back to council anyway for approval. So.
Okay. There was another question regarding parking of vehicles on the reserve. Are they allowed to do that, or they're not allowed to do that?
Some license agreements as we have in place suggest not. The intention behind that is to remove unnecessary vehicles from the site. I have spoken to Robert today about this particularly. There's some instances where wind, for example, or there's a vehicle that directly relates to that stall that needs to be adjacent to the stall holder where it's appropriate. So that would be a negotiation with each of the markets individually based on their needs.
Yeah.
And where it's appropriate.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mark, I wonder whether or not you can remove that word prohibit and put that and change that. I'll just check with the CEO. Do we need to? You don't need to have an amendment or a variation? Okay, you're happy to amendment. Thank you. Are there any further questions, Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. That was one of my questions that you've just addressed, which is good, because a number of people in the community have had concerns about not being able to have vehicles just for access to unload, load, and a number of people are elderly, and therefore it was an advantage having a vehicle there. The other was on 6.1.1. I'm just concerned that council are starting to intervene into free market in the demonstrating competency of managing markets. I just think it's a step too far. Up until then, I was happy with the rest of the policy. That's the bit that concerns me, and having vehicles concerns me. But taking out prohibited will address that. But I still have concerns. I don't think it's necessary in the type of markets we have here, but other members may have a different view.
Thank you. Councillor Corimba, you have another question?
Sorry, yeah, there was one other question, and it was regarding the clashing of dates for markets. Is there rules as to whether they can, especially long weekends, public holidays? That was another concern that was raised.
So I believe that through the Mayor, I believe we've kind of cleared this up somewhat. The beach side, for example, has the 2nd and 4th Sunday of the month. Artisan is held on the 3rd Sunday of the month, and the Victoria Farmers Market is on every Saturday morning. So the intention is, once this, if it goes through, that I'll be calling a meeting of all the market operators. As the Mayor alluded to before, we spent a fair bit of time with them personally, understanding their challenges, issues, and how we can work with them. And one of the things is longer scheduling timeframes to really alleviate this issue. I'm pretty confident that we've really got on top of this, and the settling of the markets has been important, which has happened over the last 6 months.
Just one question then. Considering there's a few things still juggling and having to work out, should we not delay this until those things get addressed? Is there any harm in that? That way we come to council, we don't have to change it again?
If the council wants to delay it until that gets addressed, they can vote to do that. I would hope that even if this was addressed and this policy and the guidelines were adopted, that there would still continue to be dialogue between the department and the markets, as Mark Brisabilla is suggesting that there will be. But if you want to move that it is not amended, adjourned, you can make a formal motion to that effect.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. Thanks. I think it's just better Sorry?
So do I have a seconder for that?
Okay.
Yeah. And until when, Councillor Corimba?
Just till the issues are addressed.
Which issues?
the ones we spoke about, things that were still outstanding. Next council meeting should be enough time.
Sorry, can you be specific about the issues that you'd like to be addressed?
The ones I spoke to just before in regards to the dates clashing, you know, the vehicles, you know, all those sort of things.
Through the Mayor, those particular matters are dealt with in the licence agreement, not so much the policy.
Okay.
So deferring the policy is not going to change. So the markets that have licences, which are primarily the beachside market and the farmers markets, actually have in their agreements the date timeframes. So they're actually been resolved by council already. And so I don't think holding back on this policy is not going to change that fact. But our intention is to sit with them and basically schedule these things. This is 12 months in advance, not tomorrow, or longer term.
Okay.
So not resolving the policy is not going to change the fact of the dates. And
all right. Thanks. I'll just remove that.
So you remove that?
That's fine.
And you're happy for that? Okay.
Yep.
So is there any more questions in relation to that, Councillor Schofield?
Yes, this is a question for Mark. When these dates are set, and quite often there's an additional market being held, are all of our businesses in that particular area, including the business on Granite Island, advised of these dates? And the reason I ask that, I have had comments given to me by some of the businesses that these markets do affect them, and if they actually know when they are going to occur, they won't have as many staff on, and also their supplies. So I think it's important that all businesses, and that is the businesses that are being run by National Trust and even the Horse Tram, are advised that when these events are going to take place. But also they also affect some of our caterers down around the causeway, and I do know on occasions when the little shop on the island hasn't been aware, they've put on extra staff and then found that there's another market on, and it's cost them dearly. So do we have a policy that ensures that each time all of those people are contacted in advance?
through the Mayor, there's no policy per se. We'd have a process that relates to major events primarily. So we have the details of all the operators that exist in that, particularly in the foreshore precinct, and we do notify them in advance of the event. We haven't traditionally for markets though, but it would be fair to say we should going forward.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp?
Question for Acting Director Prisabella. On page 78 of the agenda, the locally produced statement there. I'm just wondering whether should we have that statement in the policy, because it talks about locally produced means goods, services or products that are made or provided within the Fleurieu Peninsula geographic area, which means that the storeholder only can use local products. Because I'm just wondering how you're going to police that. Because is it really relevant or not? I don't think it is. I reckon we could remove it, because storeholders will bring their products to town if they're outside of our area and sell it. It's just free enterprise, free competition. What's your thoughts?
Through the Mayor, really it's an encouragement for that to occur. It's not intended to be a hard and fast rule. We are trying to find a balance between encouraging locally stocks and goods and services provided versus the outside stalls coming in. And whilst that's not practical to have that in every instance, there's probably a bit of a balance that we can work with the stall, with the market operators themselves, to encourage an increased percentage of those from the region.
And I suppose these are, it's market policy and guidelines rather than hard and fast rules. There any further discussion? If not, I will. Councillor Schiller, did you want to close the debate? Right, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The City of Victor Harbor Grant Program Review, the Delegations and Policy Revocations. I will do those recommendations. I think they're quite different from each other, so I'll have to do them separately. So the recommendation 1 is that Council adopts the reviewed community grants policy and the community grants guidelines as attachment A and B. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and thank you, Nick McKenzie. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns and Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification. In reading the document, it reads that way, but I just wanted assurances that the donations policy was initially set up as a safety net to make sure any people that didn't meet other criteria, that at least there was an avenue. From reading this, it implies that that will still be available. I just want confirmation of that.
Yes, it will.
Great, thank you.
And Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. Under reputation, it says we have a limited funding pool. What's the funding pool? What's the amount?
I think from memory, 55,000. Yeah, 55,000. I thought it was 700, 55,700, but it was included in the last report, and I think it is referenced in here.
Yeah.
Because there was a recommended that be an increase of about $5,000. So it was a pooling of all of those other grants together, which equated to that 55,000, for example. And this new policy guidelines gives the council the ability to either call for those grants and have it spread, or pool it into one particular area of where it thinks the needs are.
Okay, you may be able to answer this question. So you authorise, it says here, awarding grants up to and including $1,000. That's done by the CEO. 2,000 or 1,000 or 2,000 is the CEO, and then it's obviously reviewed by the community grants panel. How much money has the CEO given away, or as part of this system, to the community in this last financial year?
Well, this system you're about to adopt, so under this system, zero, but under previous grants, they're actually, my delegation was up to $500 donations, and they varied depending on their application. But most of the other grants were based on the recommendations from the council elected member panels that would then make recommendations up to $1,000, which I would then use my delegation and authorise. They wouldn't come back to the chamber. And there were certain set limits depending on the grants above that would be recommended by the panel back to the council for the allocations. So all of my delegations were in accordance with the council's decision and the panel's recommendations.
Okay, and I'll be honest with you, I've read some of the requirements, but is there anything that says that people that work for the council can't receive grants?
Yes, so if they have not if they're actually in a sporting club, so they do have conflicts for individuals cannot apply for grants. But if they work for they play in a sporting club and they're just a member like anyone else, it's no different to elect a member if they're a member.
Okay.
But they don't, I'm the only one that does the final delegation and approval, and they too are scrutinised by members of the panel.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions in relation to the first recommendation? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. The second recommendation is that council revoke resolution CHA 100028 relating to development application fees, heritage exemption of council made at the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting held on the 24th of June. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And seconding that, please. Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Either want to talk to it? Anyone want to talk to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Third recommendation is that council revokes the donation policy as provided on attachment C. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Seconded, please. By Councillor Schiller. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Fourth recommendation is that council establishes a community grants panel and festival and events grants panel consisting of 2 council employees appointed by the Chief Executive Officer and 2 council members. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield, thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Burns, thank you. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. So we have 4 panel members, 2 council and 2 council employees. Obviously, it's a decision-making process. It's a majority then decide whether the ruling goes ahead or doesn't. Is that correct?
Would be by consensus, which most of our other panels or committees are, yeah.
So that's what, all 4 or 3 consensus?
Be by all 4.
All 4?
And yes, so based on the council's policy, and then I guess if there's any discrepancy or disagreement, then it would come back to the chamber, for the chamber to make the decision.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions on that? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So we're now looking for 2 councillors for the community grants panel. If you would like to nominate for the community grants panel, if there are more than 2, then we'll go to a vote. So Councillor Schiller and Councillor Henderson. Anybody else want to nominate for the community grants panel? So the council appoint Councillor Schiller and Councillor Henderson to the community grants panel commencing Tuesday the 25th of June and concluding at the periodic elections in November. Do I have somebody to move that? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. And seconded, Councillor Schofield. Thank you. Do either of you want to discuss that? No? Does anybody want to discuss that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Can I have 2 nominations to the Festivals and Events Grants Committee, grants commencing. Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schofield. Any other nominations? No? Gone? In that case, then the recommendation is that council appoint Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson to the Festival and Events Grants. Would someone, Councillor Shelley, moving that way? Do I have a seconder? Councillor McKenzie seconding that. Are there any questions or anyone want to discuss that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Second recommendation, I'll do the 7th and 8th together on block, if you're all happy with that. That council adopts the updated sports and recreation major grant stream guidelines and adopts the major festival and events grant program guidelines. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded Councillor McKenzie. Is there any discussion on that at all? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move to item 10.3, the proposed dog off-leash zone. Councillor Schiller, you had an alternative motion you wanted to make?
Yes, I've forwarded through a motion earlier in the day to administration, but I also, I'll get you to read that out in a moment, but another part that we could additionally place in the recommendation, number 3 of the part 3 of the recommendation would be for administration to report back to council after the trial period, and I'll take your advice as to how long that would need to be.
Thank you. So reading out your motion is that you propose trialling a 24-hour off-leash dog area along the foreshore, continuous with Franklin Parade between Harbourview Terrace and Oakham Street from the 1st of September 2024 to the last day of Daylight Savings 2025. Any signage that needs to be produced can be removed and used in an alternative area in the future if the trial is unsuccessful, and that administration bring back a report to council following the trial. Do you want to speak to your motion? I'll just see if we've got a seconder for it first. Happy to second that, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to your motion?
Looking at this, it's a chance to see if it is going to work. As far as I can see, there aren't many other options available to us, and I think if we don't have a crack at seeing if it works, we'll certainly find out pretty quickly if it's going to be presenting a problem with too many dogs there. But I think we've got to give the community the opportunity to see if it works.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns?
I was a bit concerned when I initially read this because we have to provide our community with some 24-hour dog off-leash areas. And my understanding this area was proposed as a compromise from the last discussions around the bylaws. And now to look at taking this away, I've got concerns. I agree that with Councillor Schiller that the only way to really test if this is working or not is to trial it, and supportive of doing that. But I am concerned that areas that are accessible to the community need to have an option of on-lead and off-lead areas, and we just seem to be restricting more and more owners, and so many people in Victor have dogs, and it's like there's a conflict between administration and the community, and dogs are a part of our community, and we need to accommodate them as well as tourists and people. And this area is, I think, at least worthy of a trial to see how it works.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Councillor McKenzie?
I'm in support of trialling this to see how it goes. The other alternative option that administration looked at on page 117 also seems like a very reasonable location. Obviously, it's hard with environmental factors and making sure the environment is safe in that area. But I'm more than happy to see a trial, at least in this original section of beach, to see how it goes, and then come up from a plan from there.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Karemba?
If we do this trial, how are we going to, I guess, test the metrics to see whether it's successful or not? Because I'm assuming once we do this, people are going to use it. So does that mean it's successful? Or are we talking about it if there's a dog attack, or are we talking that people complain? What are the metrics to which we're going to judge whether something is successful or not?
I would imagine, Councillor Karemba, it's everything that you've said. If there's any, if it's too small and so you've got too many dogs together and there are dog attacks, if people complain because there are too many dogs in that area, all of those things will come back and be part of an investigation.
Just a follow-up question, will we be providing adequate signage then for people that don't have dogs, so they know that this is a dog off leash area?
In Councillor Schiller's recommendation, she talks about signage going there, and if it's not successful, being removed.
Okay.
Councillor Kemp?
Question for the CEO, will the public safety officers be down there more often to ensure and observe to see how the behaviour of dogs and people go?
Through the Mayor, yes. So obviously, if the trial's supported by council, we'd need to allocate specific time for public safety officers to be down there outside of the normal times that the dogs are allowed on the beach down there currently. So it's not about taking it away, it's about increasing that time, and that would feed into the trial, as Councillor Karemba has referenced, in terms of if it becomes resource intensive, if there are issues, or if there are not.
I bet Councillor Burns, you have a question?
Just one of the concerns I had about the second option was the potential for seaweed washing up, where the first option that we're talking about trialling, to me, doesn't have that issue.
The option, the area that we're talking about trialling in the wintertime has quite a lot of seaweed. that comes up, but in that summertime when we're talking about opening that area of the beach up, there is less seaweed there. Councillor Quinton, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to check if there was any commentary about the hooded plover nesting areas in the original area. I noted the concerns from council, but it didn't mention anything specifically. Was there anything noted?
I know that the area that was originally looked at, there wasn't any hooded plover areas, and this area here, I think, is similar to the original area, incorporates that. In saying that hooded plovers do move about, and if hooded plovers were there, then I would imagine that there would be some restrictions placed there, like there are on any part of the beach where the hooded plovers are, and dogs would be required to be on leash and not in that area. Councillor Cremby, you've got a question?
Just a question. This is starting to become difficult. Hooded plovers, we can't exactly send them a letter and say, guys, don't come here. So how we, we're doing a trial, we've got to commit to it, and I understand the hooded plover thing, but I'm assuming if there's constantly dogs there off leash, I would hope the hooded plovers would kind of take note, but you don't know with birds these days, do you?
Is that a question, Councillor Karemba?
My question is, are we going to police this? So are we going to have someone keeping an eye out for hooded plovers now as well?
We do have a number of community groups in our community that do very much keep an eye out for the hooded plovers, and that when a nest is discovered, then those areas are roped off. And there are a number of areas all the way along our coast where there are hooded plovers that are roped off, and members of the community quite often stand guard at those ropes and make sure that dogs and people don't go too closely. So I'm sure that that will happen. Are there any further questions? Councillor Quinton, you've got a question.
Okay, so just following on from this, if there is say you've got the 24-hour off-leash area and then a hooded plover does decide to nest there, yeah, what would happen in that circumstance? Because that's obviously going to cause a lot of conflict, I think, in the community, and it'd be something.
The same thing that happens during the off-leash periods. So, for example, down by the yacht club, during the summer times, you can have your dog off leash up until 10 o'clock in the morning. There are hooded plovers down there. That area of the beach where the hooded plovers are is fenced off, and there are people there that certainly report dog owners that are having dogs off leash close to the hooded plovers. There are signs that are erected by council saying that dogs must be on leash and not close to where the hooded plovers fence is, and I would imagine that that would be done the same way.
So there'll be an area that you have to leash your dog in an off-leash area, right?
As there is now during the summer periods, where you have to leash your dog around hooded plover nests during the off-leash times. I
was reading the other council recommendations, and the option 2 that you provided between Inman Street and Island Street, I thought it looks like a good area as well. So could there be sort of scope to have like a backup plan as well as for a trial, building onto Councillor Schiller's proposed motion?
My personal opinion would be having 2 trials at once makes it complicated. I think if this trial doesn't work, if the council decides to go ahead with this trial, if it doesn't work, the reasons that it hasn't worked will be taken into consideration in looking at a further trial or a further off-leash area during that time. Are there another question, Councillor Karemba?
Pardon my ignorance. Are hooded plovers an endangered species?
I believe they are.
They're endangered, are they? Okay.
Are there any further questions? I'll put this to the vote. Councillor Schiller, do you want to close the debate by saying anything?
Just that this was the area that the community did their deputation on, and in that deputation they articulated themselves very well, and they put some great points together for that presentation. So that's why I think we should stick to the location that has been presented.
Thank you. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's unanimously carried. We now look at the Encounter Bay Recreation Grounds Master Planning, and the recommendation is just that council receive and note the Master Planning report. If somebody would like to move, thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding that, Councillor Burns. Do either of you want to speak to that, Councillor Schofield?
Thank you. Look, I was very impressed at the first meeting of this particular group. Their consideration for their fellow sports club was absolutely astounding, actually, because normally when you get quite a few sporting clubs using the same facilities or the same grounds, there's little bit of conflict. So no, I think these clubs have really sat down, worked out what stages are required, and each of the stages actually complement other sporting clubs as well. So no, I strongly support this.
Councillor Burns, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Similar feedback. I found the different groups really cooperating with each other in some meetings and discussions I've had with them. I like the strategy of what's being done. My only concern is, and again, the CEO may be able to address that, obviously the staff in reviewing this, which is a good checklist, the expectations of the community and these groups is that it will happen sooner than later. They don't want to obviously wait 2 years to get things done. What's the time frame?
In terms of putting anything on the ground, I can't give you specific dates on that, but I think they would be pleased to see the council's support in assisting them, because obviously they have been endeavouring to try and collectively work together for some time, hence the recommendation to form the group officially and seek some support from council to do so. I've made it very clear in regards to their expectations of actually further financial contributions, that there is nothing currently in the long-term financial plan, but the development of these documents and these master plans would enable that to happen.
Councillor Karemba and then Councillor Schilling.
Yeah, I'd just like to commend Councillor Schofield, because our first meeting with his group that I was privy to, they were quite disjointed. So I can only assume the second meeting you cracked the whip and got them all into line. So congratulations.
Councillor Schiller.
Just a question, in the master plan they have allocated a space for the dragon boats, and is that still a consideration? And if so, the location that is marked there, is that potentially something that could be done earlier if it is being considered at all?
Through the Mayor, no, I don't believe it still is consideration. It was at the time, and the council did some consultation around it, and it wasn't particularly supported. And it's not a preferred location of the dragon boats either, because of the amount of other traffic that would be in and around those grounds. But it was included in the original one that was presented to council back in 2020. I've been at some meetings where dragon boats have been invited to their meetings, so they still like to include them. They have tried to find different locations on that site, but currently I would say they wouldn't still be included, but we'll continue those discussions.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor, I have a question for whoever may be able to answer it. With this newly formed committee, I can't see that they have a representative from the hockey club, yet hockey grounds are included, changes to the hockey grounds are included in the plan. Do they have a representative, or are they just invited to some meetings?
Through the Mayor, I will clarify my understanding they are members of the same group of the hockey club, because it's got the riding club, the hockey club, the bowling club, the netball club, the football club and the cricket club. We're all part of that Encounter Bay Sporting Grounds.
My recollection is at the meeting that I went to that Councillor Schofield and Councillor Karimba were both an apology, so I was asked to go. The hockey club was there and they said that they were quite happy with their rooms. They were part of that, but they weren't part of that discussion in terms of the master plan.
Thank you. Just to clarify, in the master plan, there will be changes to the space that the hockey club currently uses. So, yes, I'm hoping they are included in the discussion, but I was keen to know whether they actually had representative on the committee rather than just consulted when necessary.
Yes, they do have a representative on the committee. Yep, thank you. Just Victoria wants to clarify something.
Sorry, just to clarify. So the schematic layout that's in your agendas was from 2020. It has actually changed since then also. And this was really their attempt at trying to put some lines and to present to council at the time. So I think this will be further improved and probably changed based on a period of time and different appetite for where things need to go as well.
Councillor Schofield, you wanted to say something?
If I may.
You will be closing the debate.
Okay.
So can we just wait until everybody's spoken? Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Kemp?
Just a few questions along the lines of, I understand the master planning report. Again, who's going to pay for all this? The clubs are not strapped with a lot of money, I would have expected. When you look at the master planning process, so who's going to pay for the consultants to do the master planning? Would that be sort of a joint venture between council and the sporting clubs, or just council only? And of course, going on looking at all the development which they want to go through various stages, I can see council flipping the bill for most of these things with grant funding. I can't see the clubs doing it, but it's only master planning at this moment. But just what's the expenses on the master planning side?
Okay, if I may, through the mayor. So initially, we obviously believe we can do it within our current resources because it's a collection of data, which we know we have a fair bit of already. Part of the data we collected for our open space strategy, urban growth management strategy, actually feeds into a lot of the data that they need. And also what we intend to do, if throughout the year, once we've collected that data and build the business case behind their master planning, if we have any savings within our capital budget, we would then come back to the chamber and look to utilise those to finalise the detailed master plan this financial year. If we don't, then we'll be in a position to present a budget bid to council because we would have all the data behind it. So we're not looking at additional costs at this current time, but we would look to implement it with any efficiencies that we find throughout the year, but we'll keep council updated.
So you will be allocating staff time, which is money, because they're not doing other jobs. So I'm just wondering how much that would impact on the staff doing their duties.
Again, because we've actually looked at what we've got planned and we have a lot of that data and information already, we've said, I don't know the exact dollar figure, but we know we could actually utilise existing staff time to collate those documents and feed into the information. We've formed the group by way of council resolution anyway, so we need to facilitate and support the group. This is the main topic of the group in terms of its meetings. So those meetings that are already in place by council will assist to feed and check information with our resourcing. So, but the additional consultancy costs would be as per savings through capital.
Part of the planning is also building a basketball stadium. I'm just wondering how much that may impact on our new precinct.
There's no plans for a basketball stadium.
But they've got it in their master plan.
Yeah, there was lots of things. It's master.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Schofield, do you want to close the debate?
Thank you. Rest assured, there's no stadium in this. One of the things that I was quite impressed about, and that was the hockey club actually working with the netball club on allocation and reallocation of their fields and their land between them. And also the group understood the importance of the netball club to acquire additional courts. So I think, again, I congratulate them on actually coming back with us that shows that they've really thought about what they want. They've worked out together the priorities that they believe are required to achieve their goal.
Thank you. That wraps up the debate, and I'll put the recommendation, which is just receiving and noting the report, to the council. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We come to 10.5, the community land revocation, lot 202 Armstrong Road, and the recommendation is that council, having considered the community and stakeholder engagement findings, authorise the submission of the appropriate revocation document to the Minister for Local Government for consideration. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, for years we've been working towards the most beneficial and cost-effective way to deliver a regional sports and recreation precinct. The current proposal that we have is the result of that, and it's the only cost-effective approach. The revocation of the land is necessary to achieve this. And as I stated at the briefing session last week, our community is currently looking a gift horse in the mouth.
Councillor Schofield, do you want to say anything? Does anybody want to say anything? Councillor Burns and then Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Mayor. At the last meeting, Councillor Quinlan rightly expressed concerns about the length of the proposed lease of the community land. These are the same concerns that I also have. The CEO advised that we couldn't have multiple 42-year leases, which, looking at the legislation, I believe that's not correct. Clause 202, subsection 4A says that a council can enter a new 42-year lease at the expiry of the first 42-year lease. At that meeting also, the CEO conceded that the developer that wanted the 99-year lease, and in my experience, any company wanting a substantial long-term lease is so they can sell it in the future. A company can make back its cost for construction, and if the operation isn't profitable, sell the facilities and get double return on investment. In 20 years, who's to say the developer company will even exist? I understand Councillor Henderson's frustration that council has been talking about the sports precinct for over 15 years and nothing's eventuated. I would say that is because each council proposal to date has been too expensive and isn't meeting what the sporting groups actually need. I understand this is council's third attempt in the last 4 years that I'm aware of. No one's disputing that the basketball, netball and gymnastics club need improved facilities, as do other sporting groups within Victor and Encounter Bay, but they should only be facilities that sporting clubs and community can afford. Councillor Henderson also mentioned that the Victor Harbour needs more childcare facilities. No one's disputing that. However, I think everyone's forgotten about the childcare centre with 70 places being built next year as part of a $70 million health hub facilities next to the Aquatic Centre, and the 140-place childcare centre being built at Gala by one of the leading childcare organisations in Adelaide. This will give us 5 childcare centres within our immediate area. As our population grows over the next 20 years, there may be need for more, but like the 2 new childcare centres being built next year, if there is a market for more childcare centres, private enterprise will respond. Councillor Henderson has also mentioned that she believes that the developer partnership proposal is the cheapest option available. I disagree. I think the Basketball Association proposal would be cheaper if council administration obtained government grant funding. Councillor Schiller said at that meeting that obtaining large government grants is hard, and yes it is, but I say just because something's hard doesn't mean you don't try. Mount Gambier Council was successful in obtaining $10 million state grant funding and $15 million in federal grant funding, and Mount Gambier Council only had to contribute $360,000 of ratepayers' money for their sports precinct. So it is possible. And other South Australian councils have been successful with grant funding. Why can't ours? However, as a cautionary note, we should learn from the mistakes that Mount Gambier Council made. They went to the community and said their sports precinct will only cost $25 million, and to trust council administration and their elected members with this. On completion, their sports precinct costs $61 million, and annual rates in Mount Gambier are now 10.4% to pay for this generational debt. We need to also look at the Gala Sports Precinct, despite all the promises. Thank you. And assurances. They're now seeking a further $90,000 to rectify the errors made. At the moment, we don't have actual contract terms, and I believe we should be deferring this until we actually get to see the contract and actually get a full prudential report, then reconsider the land revocation.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond to anything, Councillor Burns?
Not to Councillor Burns's debate, but just to correct you, in terms of the provisions of section 202 4A, you need to actually read that in the entirety of the legislation, because it also says subject to other requirements of this Act and other laws. So council cannot a community land lease can only be for 42 years. And if the extension is to be made, it must go out for a public open expression of interest for the site and also undertake public consultation again. So it's not a guarantee for the commercial component in which they were seeking from council. It was a 99-year lease. So commercially, that's what the developer is seeking, more than a 42 years, and you cannot provide that under the community land current requirements. You need to go out for a public consultation, but also an open expression of interest for utilisation of that site. It's not for the actual continuation of a developer under a commercial lease arrangement. It can be a 50 plus 50, and that's a guaranteed 50 for the current tenant within the lease, but under community land, there are current provisions under the Act and under the laws for community land releasing.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller.
Without getting bogged down in the actual precinct itself, this is a step in the process. It's about revoking a percentage of that land. It is not all of the land. It is looking at the areas that, that many of the commercially beneficial propositions that may come about, and they may come about because we haven't got a heads of agreement. We haven't got a contract. So this isn't a vote on whether the precinct goes ahead. This is a vote on trying to facilitate further conversation with the developer.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Corimba.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know where to begin with this. Maybe the fact that 70% of respondents said they don't want this to happen. Now, I understand administration have made it clear that, you know, when we go out to consultation, it's not in substitute of making decisions, but it should really lead us in the direction of what the community want, because that's exactly what we're here to do. Now, I understand that we have to make bigger decisions than what some people want in the community for the greater good of the community, but there's just too many variables right now. And at the moment, I think the developer is sitting there quite quietly, just smiling his head off because there's no pushback. There is absolutely no pushback. 149 years, that's 37 and a half terms of council we're going to hand over land. And as much as we say we're in control, we are not in control. The developer is in control. Once you hand over that land, we can have a say in what happens, but there's no guarantee. And I just think that I would like to see, and same thing, I haven't seen any paperwork that substantiates that the developer has asked for 149 years. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any contracts. I haven't seen anything. We are so in the dark here. And I understand Councillor Schiller is saying that, you know, this is just one step. Well, I think we should just pull up stumps here. And I'm not saying not to go ahead, but I think we really owe it to the community that we get some more information, because there is a lot of pushback in the community. And to allay some of their fears, we need to do our due diligence. That is what we elected to do. You know, there's been talk about, and I know they're trying to sell it, a childcare centre, other offerings. We don't even know how they're going to compete with what we already have. I haven't seen a date when this childcare centre is going to be delivered. It could be 5, 10, 15 years, nothing. We have nothing. All we have is some words, and it's just trust us, we've got everything under control. I think that we really need to just have a good hard think about this, and really a little bit of pushback on the developer wouldn't hurt. They're not going to walk away from this. This is, if I had to invest in something, this is a no-brainer, right? Return on investment guaranteed. No risk. Where is the pushback from this elected body when it comes to this stuff? And that's what really concerns me. And I think that concern is growing in the community every day. More things in confidence. We've been told, the CEO has said it to the community, that the elected members are in, part of the negotiations. I haven't seen anything, nothing. So I'm not driving this. I don't think any of the elected members are driving this. So I just think, you know what? I think time for the handbrake. And I'm not saying stop, but this needs to be deferred until we see some actual information.
Thank you, Councillor Corimbo. Councillor Schofield, you seconded it. You chose not to speak. You've got a question?
So am I right in, when we're having a look at this, that we are asking the minister to change the land usage? And am I right in thinking, until we have confirmation on whether the minister is going to agree or not, and there is a fair chance that he won't agree, that there could be no negotiations with the investor until we actually know if there's some land or not? Am I on the right area, or am I up the creek?
You are correct in we are asking the minister to revocate 30% of that land from community land to land that can be leased out. My understanding is that negotiations will still and are still occurring in relation to that. Council has given we've all discussed what our non-negotiables are, what absolutely has to happen, what our negotiables are, and the administration is still talking about that with the organisation involved, and that in April, Council resolved to continue that process of looking at land revocation and continue that process of negotiation. Councillor McKenzie.
Remind me, is it a case with this revoking of the land, if it doesn't go ahead, that the land will come back into what the existing classification of that land is? Am I right in saying that?
Victoria?
Through the Mayor. So the land is owned by council. It will always be owned by council. It's currently classed as community land. Council's required to, on purchasing any site, to either class it as community land or exclude it from community land status at the time of purchase. So yes, if the council seeks approval from the minister to approve the revocation, then it will come back to council. Council will need to endorse again his recommendation to remove the community land status. And if council does not continue in its negotiations with the developer, it's not satisfied with its agreement or its agreement for lease, then it can actually convert it straight back to community land.
Great, thank you. And then just my follow-up question, when do we expect to hear next from the developer? What's the next stage in our process beyond this revoking of the land?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, there are some conditions precedent around the planning side of things, and this is one of them. So depending on the decision tonight, we still have regular meetings with the developer, but we can't progress the agreement for lease until we know what the terms are going to be. And if it's 42 years, that's different to what is currently in the heads of agreement. So the negotiations, the putting together the agreement for lease, are currently on hold while the developer is still undertaking things like costings and initial assessments. But we're not progressing any further until council have made a decision.
Councillor Quinton.
Just seeking some clarification. tonight, this vote is not about whether we revoke the land or not. It's basically we're putting in a submission for consideration, and then once it has been considered, they'll come back with feedback, and it's still not locked in at that point. We still have time to then consider it and progress forward, getting more information, because there obviously is a lack of information under the commercial confidentiality and whatnot. So if we put this in a land for consideration, it's considered, it comes back, we can get more information before making any decisions that lock us in. Is that, I understand this correctly?
Yes, that's correct. And I think they're the things we've raised in the many meetings we've had with members in terms of this is one part of a very long process in terms of the negotiations of the partnership, and council needs to be really comfortable in regards to that agreement for lease and that contract. That's a separate decision altogether. This is a component. You need to make a submission to the minister to seek approval to revoke a portion of that community land status and the reasons why you are doing that. That would then come back from the minister, as it has with other revocations the council has undertaken. I think I gave some examples before. The council then needs to endorse that decision for it to take effect. You can hold that on, place that on hold until such time as you are comfortable with your contract and prudential report and all the other due diligence that you need to do in regards to the agreement with the developer. And they are concurrently happening. The last decisions that the Chamber made were around the provision of its contribution and also the agreement to go out for public consultation on the land revocation.
So just a follow-up question, because I would like to continue to explore, you know, the discussion tonight about the retaining community land status, getting the 42-year lease with the option that it can be renewed with obviously the open expression of interest and other mandates. And then I just had an email before from Jody just clarifying that after that second 42 years, making it 84 years, like if they were successful in going forward again, they can renew again for 42 years with the same processes of expressions of interest and whatnot. So, I mean, theoretically, it is possible that we could still retain community land status. The developers would get, I think it was 129 years or something if they get 3 42 leases together. 100, that's terrible. Sorry, 126. Then we surely the developer would be happy with that, because that's basically 126 years. And we've asked questions along the way about negotiating with the revocated land about timeframes, and we've been told that we can write that into the contract and make it foolproof, not foolproof, but give some semi-guarantees around how things will roll. So theoretically, could we retain community land and have a contract negotiated with a developer where they do get that first right of refusal? I know it's an open expression, but can we have? Surely there's a loophole.
Through the Mayor, there are guidelines that are provided by the Minister's Office, and we can't enter into a lease beyond the 42 years. We can't give them any guarantee that they're going to get another renewal beyond that. And their financiers have made it clear that what they're looking for is 99. So, I mean, that's where it's at.
Thank you, Councillor Karimba.
Thanks. Just a couple of yeah, I do. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, when we say council own the land, I hate to assume we're talking about 9 elected members, but it's actually all the residents of Victor Harbor, correct? Because I just want to make sure that we gauge what we're actually saying when we say the council own the land. It's actually a lot of people out in the community, and a lot of them aren't happy. So just want to clarify that is the case.
Well, if you're referring to the council can be referred to the people in this room, the building you're sitting in, the area that we have. So City of Victor Harbor. Okay,
that's who owns the land. All right. Also, and sorry for Director Roberts, did you just before say that they're not they haven't quite worked out that, and I'm talking about the developer here, they haven't got their financials, not necessarily where they're going to get the money from, but they actually haven't worked out the viability of the project. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, no, that's not what I said. I said they're still doing costings. So they're getting builders on board and refining their cost estimates.
Okay. But and I know a little bit about cost estimates because when I do
You're a builder,
development,
yeah.
yeah. So when I do cost estimates, that is literally to work out whether the development is worth doing or not.
Sorry, what's your question?
So my
Your
question
question's
is,
been answered.
okay, my question is, then how do they know they need the land for 149 years? If they don't know if the project's viable, how do they know that?
So through the mayor, that's not what I said before.
Right.
I can take your question on notice, but that information has already been provided through the HOA and the direct negotiation process. There's been quite a lot of background information that's been provided to elected members, including the dates and things like that. So maybe if you wanted to review that and if you still got the question, I can provide an answer.
Okay, can I move a formal motion, please?
Certainly.
I'd like to adjourn this until we have a workshop to open up and unpack everything we've just discussed here in a less formal manner, and we can really make sure that we are 100% happy.
So
and then we're
you
able to
be
explain.
very specific
Okay.
about the wording.
I'd
of
like
the
to
formal
put
motion.
a adjournment motion until we have a workshop to unpack all issues discussed tonight in this motion prior to moving the vote forward.
Do I have
Next
a
council meeting.
Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Burns. There's no debate on a formal motion. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, I make a casting vote. My casting vote is against. I think we have had a number of workshops. I think we need to make a decision.
Excuse me, Your Worship, there's quite a conversation happening in our gallery.
Thank you.
Can I call a division, please?
Not yet.
No.
So the reason that I'm voting against your formal motion is that I think that we have had a number of workshops. We've had a public consultation, and this is a motion about whether or not it goes to the minister. When we get that decision from the minister, that is another touch point where we can decide whether to go on or whether to go off. I think it's time that we make a decision in relation to this. So that it's lost, but you can have a division if you'd like. So all those in favour of a formal motion, knowing that when you have a division and if you want to change your vote, you're able to do that. So councillor Burns, councillor Karimba and councillor Kemp. Councillor Karimba, are you still standing voting for the formal motion? Yeah, and sorry, and councillor Quinton, those against the formal motion, councillor McKenzie, councillor Schiller, councillor Schofield and councillor Henderson, and it's lost on the casting vote. So we go back to the recommendation. I think everybody has spoken. Councillor Kemp, you haven't spoken. You would like to speak?
No, I haven't spoken. Doing this revocation of the land and what the developer wants, I think we still can achieve, through maintaining the land and community title, and still give the developer an opportunity to improve. And I'll explain a little bit more detail. We went to public consultation as required, and the public have spoken. Majority of people want to keep the land in community title. They don't want it to go to commercial title. The community had an opportunity to do it. If only 400 people responded, then that's what we listened to. If the other 16,000 didn't want to, well, that's a bad luck. They can't complain about our decision making. We're here to make decisions on behalf of our community, and I think this is what we should be doing. And one of the things we do, and we should do better, is listen to our community. And this is an opportunity to show our community that we do listen when there's people against certain processes. Now, I would imagine that if we offered the, and I don't know if we have yet, maybe the CEO can identify that, offered a 42-year, we can't guarantee a second 42-year, but if that will be like a carrot to the developer, if they really want to develop this and go with it as a money making and return on investment, they will accept a 42 with an option of 42. It'll be like a carrot for them to do the right thing by the community to keep the facility running and up to scratch and up to requirements. So 84 years potentially, but 42 years is a good return on investment, I would have thought. And again, that could be an opportunity for the term of a council, and after 42 years we buy it off them. You know, we don't know what will happen in 42 years' time, but today I think we should be making a decision about what is best for our community and listen to our community by keeping it as a community title, starting with a 42-year, and then the players of the day in 42 years' time will make a decision about whether they continue or not. As I said, it'll still be a good thing. One of the things I do find interesting, why I can't support this current motion, is the definition of alienation in law. The transfer of the ownership of property rights. Most leases contain restrictions against alienation. Sorry about that. When will we see those restrictions? Because if we don't get those restrictions in the transfer, then the ownership of property rights goes to the developer, according to what this says under the Act.
So probably go to your first question or statement. I think you mentioned whether I had taken it up. So we have asked the developer in terms of what we heard from the community concern around the 99 plus 25 plus 25 lease that came back via the consultation. And while I think explained at the forum, council has previously provided 50 plus 50-year leases to current users of its facilities. We have put that to the developer saying, would they be happy with a 50 plus 50? Obviously, then the ability for council to negotiate those terms would be if the land revocation is removed. So removing the land status doesn't set in an agreement with the developer for any period of time. It just gives the council the ability to negotiate what that looks like. In terms of alienation, obviously that's part of the requirements under your lease agreement. Your contract to a lease is actually making sure all those provisions are put in place for what that looks like in terms of community access, community use, change of ownership, maintenance of the facility, the life of the facility, what happens after 50, 60 years and the asset's not viable anymore, developer's requirement to replace it. All those things are what council is considering and negotiating and doing its due diligence with the developer on. And we are not there yet. This was just the first stage in terms of that tenure of what possibly could be negotiated. Even if the minister does come back and revokes it, it's still within the council's hands as to what it determines is an appropriate length of time.
Thank you for that. Just clarity around when you said we've done this before. I guess most of the 50 plus 50s are around more sporting clubs and also the education department for the high school, but no private developer I don't think has 50 plus 50 in my knowledge.
I'm not sure on the entire tenure of the Causeway. That is a private developer that built on council land. So the can't think of the name, the Causeway Cafe is a private developer that has built on council land, and the tenure of that, I'm not sure whether it was beyond, I think it was probably beyond, I think it was 42 or I think it was a bit more because I'm not sure what's still left on it, but I need to follow that up.
Just in finishing within my 3 minutes, again, I ask the members to reconsider because I think there's an opportunity again to talk to our community, also look at the 42 plus 42 and see what the developer comes back with and give direction to our senior staff, our CEO, to take the message from the chamber about we're not happy with the 99 plus 25. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now ask Councillor Henderson if you would like to close the debate.
Point of order.
I
just had a question. I had my hand up for a question, if that's okay.
Sorry, but didn't
That's
see you
okay.
there.
Just a question regarding the 42 potential year lease, and then it goes back out to expressions of interest. That expression of interest would then have to show that there's already a building on site, a business on site. Wouldn't that be part of the expression of interest? It's not just the land because there's already buildings on it.
Yeah, so if council was to retain the community land status, it would need to have a community land management plan which dictated exactly what could and could not happen on the land, what was there and what was being used for. That would be there for the tenure of the life of that lease, and then that would dictate how it went out for that next expression and the utilisation of those facilities. So all community land has to have a community land management plan, which determines how the council uses it in accordance with the community's requirements.
Okay, just a follow-up question. So with that community land plan, does that not then allow us to put in parameters that whoever decided, or if they wanted to take it over, would have to buy the whole thing lock, stock and barrel in regards to the premise? I'm trying to understand and unpack, because the land, we can't obviously buy the land, but the land is one thing, but there's already going to be buildings on it. There's going to be agreements. So how does that actually, is there something that can be done in that sense?
I'd need to take it on notice. There may well be. The community land management plan is something you take out to the community, because we have to do it for all our community land. For example, the Victor Oval, we say to the community, this is it's utilised by the school, utilised by these clubs, it has these facilities, and these what they use it for. Are you happy with that continued use? You consult with the community. They may guess we're happy with that. No, we don't want to, for example, see cricket on there, or we do. You then formulate plan, and then that's how the land is managed on behalf of the community. The lease tenure, the community may say they don't want to see leases any more than 7 years. They want to see it going out for a call for other clubs every 7 years. And that's what you would follow under that community land management plan.
The follow-up question. And so then couldn't this be used as a mechanism to make sure that the developer is on the straight and narrow and doesn't do things that we don't want them to do? It's like, you know, you've gone for 2 years, you've been good, it's been great for the community, or likewise, you haven't done what we've asked you to do, you've stepped outside the line, we don't want to actually renew your lease.
So your agreement for lease enables you to use that as the vehicle to dictate what you do and don't want on that land and how it is used by that's who's you're leasing it to. So your community land management plan is more broader than that. Your challenge here is you have a developer currently that does not wants more than 42 years and wants a guaranteed 99-year lease plus. So that is a challenge. That's why we actually embarked on the land revocation, only because of those initial discussions the council has had, elected members, with the developer about what their terms are. So all your questions are absolutely valid, but that's not what was put on the table by the developer. So our predicament now is that council, its application is to remove the community land status so that you can explore further with this developer. As I said before, you may get further and not be happy with those outcomes in that agreement for lease and not go any further. And then the community land status would be put back on.
Councillor Schiller, a question, and then Councillor Burns, a question.
The basic question is that my understanding at the moment is that by revoking this, we still haven't locked in. We are obviously locking in taking this to the minister, and we haven't. That's all.
So what is your question,
The
Councillor Schiller?
question is, we haven't locked. We will not be. The question is that this will not commit us to 99 plus 25 plus 25. So my question is, at this stage, we have to still negotiate that lease length, and obviously it's sounding like at 42 years the developer's not happy with that, and that's, I can see that at 99 they're going to be more palatable. So the question is, whether we have flexibility in the lease length at this point in time.
Through the Mayor. Short answer, no, you are not locking yourselves into a 99 plus 25 plus 25. This is purely to put a recommendation to the minister.
Thank you. And Councillor Burns, you had a question.
Yes, just for clarification again, if the land revocation doesn't go ahead at this point, my understanding from the conversations earlier is that it doesn't stop the negotiations still occurring. I suppose part of my concern this evening
Sorry,
is...
Councillor, what is your question?
That was a question. Just clarification on that.
Yeah, no, the negotiations can still occur.
Correct.
All right. Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The amount of investment that the developer is looking at is quite a large amount of investment. for a short term of 42 years on returns for that investment. Basically, that length of time is the term of an average house loan. So if you want to compare those two things, they're like chalk and cheese. Obviously, if you're investing a huge amount of money, you need time for returns on that investment. That's my point. Secondly, if the land is to change in its status, that doesn't mean to say that the accessibility of our community to use facilities right across that space will change. It'll still be used for community, the broad community, in all sorts of different ways. So the community is not actually losing anything here. As I said before, looking a gift horse in the mouth.
Thank you. That closes the debate. No, the debate is closed. I now put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Can I have a division, please? All those in favour? Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Quinton, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. And those against, Councillor Burns, Councillor Karemba and Councillor Kemp. That is carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 12.1, request to name reserve, Willow Creek Reserve, and the recommendation is that council endorse the renaming of an unnamed reserve to Willow Creek Reserve. Can I have someone to move that way? Councillor Schiller, thank you. And seconding that, Councillor Burns. Do either of you want to speak to that? Thank you, Councillor Schiller.
Just to say that it's a nice name and I think it's well worth doing.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Same thing. I thought it was a good name and
Thank
worth
you.
doing.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. .2 is the public litter management policy, and the recommendation is that council adopt the public litter management policy. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Either of you like to speak to that? No, anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns?
It was only a clarification question. Most of the policy read well. I just wanted to check that are there any existing bins on walkways, parks or public places, bike trails and elsewhere that will be reduced because of this policy?
Through the mayor, not at this stage. It's just to not, I mean, we might do an audit in the future, but there's no immediate plan
Okay, at this stage.
at this stage.
Are there any further commentary or questions? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Waste management policy, and the recommendation is that council adopt the waste management policy as provided. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp, and seconding Michael Quinton. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns.
Just to point out that 6.1.1, whilst it says that's the policy, the practice is they don't repair bins. I've had 2 damaged by trucks and I've had to get them fixed myself, even after going to the Waste Authority, ringing him up, going out there, and I just gave up in the end. And I just think, hopefully this is not reflective of the experience of residents within. It's all very well having a policy, but if they don't actually follow it, what's the point?
Any further commentary? Councillor Karemba.
Just a question for Councillor Burns. When you went to get your bin fixed, did you identify yourself as a councillor?
No, I didn't. Just as a ratepayer, I'm not going to use my position for any advantage. I was just a ratepayer.
Yes. Is there any further discussion? In that case, we'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Sorry, councillor Corimba, did you vote on that? I didn't see your hand. Voted for it? Yep, thank you. That's carried. 12.4, sponsorship of the 11th Australian Stream Management Conference and Awards Gala Dinner. The recommendation is that council approve silver sponsorship at a cost of $3,000. Someone like to move that way? If there's no mover, that will lapse for want of a mover. You want to move that way, councillor Henderson? And do I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Schiller. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Schiller?
I think the commentary that's in the report validates the reason for this sponsorship, and I think when we have something important like this within the city of Victor Harbor, it's appropriate for our council to be waving the flag.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Corimba and then Councillor Burns.
I read here that it is it 5 complimentary tickets to the gala valued at $750. Is that what the complimentary registrations means? Like tickets to the actual gala dinner, and it's like alcohol and stuff included, is it? Or
Usually those
galas. No, it's normally a I understand what this group do, and I'm all for it. But now with tough economic times, I don't think we're sending a good message to the community that we're going to give 5 tickets away to this event. It just doesn't seem right. I'm not saying they don't do good stuff. I'm on the board, or I'm on that committee, but I think we can send a message without having to spend money.
Councillor Burns.
Am I correct? And I think that probably answers Councillor Corimba's question. Page 179, it says that due to savings in the climate change actions project, there should be no cost. So there's not actually requiring the $3,000.
No, it's saying you've got budget provision. We're not asking for an increase in the budget. You could use the facilities or funds within that budget to fund it. And the other thing is it's completely up to the chamber, but Councillor Corimba's question, it may be that some of the volunteers that you have working in your Inman Valley or Hindmarsh Valley group, you can actually give those tickets away. So it's not about council members, but it's another way of promoting and supporting those volunteers in our community who work in those places.
It's nothing extra, it's already within the budget. Thank you.
Yes. Is there any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now go to minutes of council committee meetings, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the public minutes and public meeting summary of the Special Audit and Risk Committee meeting that was held on the 20th of May. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns.
Just to let you know that the minutes are incorrect. On page 197, I voted against this. It just says carried. It doesn't note that I voted against it. And also in 6.1, it says in there that the mayor and Councillor Corimba were be excluded. The chair agreed that they could stay in the meeting, and the committee only acknowledged receipt, not they weren't approving of the draft prudential report, only receipt. And there's a number of feedback items that went back to management. If that's corrected, then I'm happy to vote and support, but otherwise.
Usually with, unless it is carried unanimously and the presiding member says it wants it to be noted that it's carried unanimously, it just puts carried. It doesn't say, we don't say in committee meetings whether.
Previous ones have, where I've voted, so.
Can I do also your reference to the members were included? It says the public be excluded with the exception of?
In 198, it says the Mayor and Councillor Crank to be excluded from attendance in the meeting for agenda, and that was amended.
No, it says order that all members of the public except Victoria McCurdy, Jodie Roberts, Kelly Knight, Stacey, blah, 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 Mayor Jenkins and Karemba be excluded. It's the way we write it for
Okay.
every single meeting.
Okay,
It's correct.
it's just the wording. Okay.
Any further questions? Or no, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 13.2, the CEO Performance Review Committee meeting minutes on the 22nd of May. Recommendation and 1 and 2 I'll do on block. Council receive and note the minutes, and that Council adopt the reviewed Performance Review Committee terms of reference. Would someone like to move that way on block? Councillor Schofield. And a seconder, please. Councillor Mackenzie. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Mackenzie, no. Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to it? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee minutes. The recommendation is that Council receive and note the minutes. Council, you're moving that way, Councillor Schiller, and seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to those minutes? Councillor Schiller.
I just make the comment that this committee, although you look at our minutes and you don't see a great deal of action, there is a lot of commentary that goes on in these meetings, and the direct contact that we have with Scott Champion and our new infrastructure manager, Scott, which I can't remember his last name, that is a very important part of these meetings where community members are able to show, their struggles and try and nut out things, even though they may not be coming up as resolutions. So just reiterating the value of that committee.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller, and I'd also agree with you that it is a very important committee, and I would say that since you've been chairing it and been able to provide some insight that perhaps able-bodied people may not have, it's achieved an awful lot. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to that? No? Does anybody want to speak to the minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recreation Centre Management Committee minutes of the 21st of May. Recommendations that Council receive and note those minutes. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp, and seconding that, Councillor Burns. Either of you want to speak to the minutes?
Yes.
You want to speak to the minutes?
Yes, thank you. I was fortunate enough to be able to sit in the last committee and found it really good participation by all the different clubs. It was a very good meeting. So I was pleased to actually occasionally be able to get to some of these other committee members' meetings, which is a good insight as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Subsidiaries and representative reports. The first one is the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Financial Performance Report and third budget review for 23-24. And the recommendation is that Council endorse the third budget review and the financial performance report. Moving that way, please. Thank you, Councillor Kemp. And seconding, Councillor Burns. Any discussion?
Just, it was good to see net surplus. They've been working hard to improve their performance and reduce their costs without compromising service, and I like to see that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 14.3 is the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority third quarter budget review for 23-24, and it's a similar recommendation. 14.2, I beg your pardon, 14.2. Horse Tram Authority, appointment of Audit Committee Deputy Chairperson. So the recommendation is that Council appoint Laura Hodgson as the Deputy Chairperson to the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority Audit Committee until the expiry of her current term. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, and Councillor Schofield seconding that. Either of you want to say anything? Anybody want to say anything? I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Now we go to 14.3. The Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority third quarter budget review, and the recommendation is that we receive the third quarter budget review, noting there are no changes to constituent council contributions. Somebody like to move that way? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schiller seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns.
I can't support this, not that my vote will really matter anyway. There was a number of capital replacement items that they've noted not included in the budget, and given the current $543,000 deficit, I don't see significant work being done to reduce that. And I am concerned about what the cost of those capital replacement items are, because they're not included in the budget amount. And for those reasons, if it had that in, I would have changed my consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Henderson, did you want to? No. In that case, I'll put it at the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There are no matters of urgency, so we go to 16.1, questions on notice. The first one is related to questions from Councillor Karemba, and I'll take that as read. They are in the minutes in the agenda. The second question is on notice around market engagement. I'll take that as read from Councillor Karemba. Questions on notice regarding the Bluff boat ramp from Councillor Kemp. I'll take them as read. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Quinton and then Councillor Schiller. These are questions, Councillor Quinton. No questions. Yeah, wrong place, wrong time. That's it. That's fine. Councillor Schiller.
Two questions. The first one is we're planning to do a transport workshop with Alexandrina Council. Just wondering whether that's progressed at all.
Yes, it's booked for the 29th of July.
The next one is I've had a question from a member of the public which may have gone out to other councillors, but it's probably worth putting here regarding questioning about if the precinct goes ahead, at what point of time is it appropriate for grant funding to be sought? So their question was whether we'd actually sought grant funding to try and reduce $11.7 million contribution, which we currently haven't, but to give her an accurate time frame for when that is appropriate.
If I may, through the Mayor, so we are already applying for funding. We've applied both state and federally for grant funding. We have applied through the Regional Precinct Fund, and we are in contact with state and federal government. The Mayor and I have appointments to see federal ministers while we're in Canberra next week, and we've already had some meetings with state ministers. So we are currently trying to seek funding.
Thank you. Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question for the CEO. The CEO made an attempt to contact Mr. Ablett regarding a gratuitous payment as per the email dated 20th of 3rd, 2024 for damages caused to his boat within the Encounter Bay boat channel.
Through the Mayor, no, I haven't. He made a claim through our Lahuga Mutual Liability Scheme. He has the ability to appeal that claim or that decision, and that's where it remains.
Okay.
Okay, go to motions on notice. There's a motion on notice regarding David, you've got a question?
A two-part question. I'll get the CEO to take it on notice. This is about illegal camping in our area. Just wondering how often have we moved people on and given advice, and compared to how many expiation notices that have been issued? Because there are a lot of campers around everywhere, even in the Esplanade car park the other morning, last Friday around 10 o'clock, 9:30, they had their own awning out and everything in the Esplanade car park. So, I mean, I guess we need to find out if our public inspectors are doing an educational program or they're actually giving expiation notices, because I think the word's out there, come to Victor because it's open.
I'm happy to provide that information. I'll take it on notice and provide it back to you.
You have another question?
I do. Just a question for the Mayor. There's been just some discussion between yourself and another elected member about potentially looking at charging holiday homeowners extra rates. Is that something we're seriously considering doing?
When you say we considering doing, you talking about the council?
Yeah, we're looking at actually seriously investigating this. I know some councils are doing it, but I'm just wondering, is that something we are actually thinking about doing?
Not that I'm aware of.
Just because you've asked the question as to how can we look into this. So is our intent to look into this is what my question is, I guess, as per what you said on your email.
I think that what if there was an intent to look into it, and I think it's something that we need to look into in terms of, you know, we have 40% of our residents don't live here, or they just have holiday homes. We've got a housing crisis. Then it's worth looking at, well, what are other councils doing? What's Adelaide City Council doing? Because I think they're doing a differential rate for empty houses. I think some Queensland councils are doing. There are pros and cons with doing those sorts of things. I know that when it was first raised about a differential rate on Airbnb some time ago, I had a call from somebody involved in Airbnb lobby group who made a really valid point that people who are cleaners, there's a lot of people involved in the cleaning industry down here. And if people stopped Airbnb-ing their spare rooms, they would lose their jobs. A number of people would lose jobs. So weighing that up with what Airbnbs provide to our town, and also what they cost our town. And when I say, you know, cost, I'm talking about accommodation costs. It's something that is worth a discussion. There's no point having a discussion, I don't think, with the elected members unless we actually know the challenges with that, the pros, the cons, and can have a discussion around what actually is happening in other places and what other places have found. So initially, when I'm thinking about the difficulty with accommodation and rental accommodation down here, and I say, well, you know, it's something that we perhaps need to have a discussion about. I'll find out as much as I can about that before I bring it to the elected members. But certainly it's nothing that's been formalised at all. But it's something that I would not like to bring to everybody without actually having a bit of background.
Yeah, I guess my concern with even looking at it is that we're sending a message to holiday homeowners that if you don't give up your house, we're just going to charge you more for having a holiday home. And I don't think that's an appropriate message. But by all means, investigate. And I'm sure we will let all our holiday homeowners know that we are investigating such things.
It's certainly not the message that we're wanting to give out. And somebody suggested to me, they said that in one particular town, that with the rates notice they gave out to holiday home owners, that they asked whether or not they would consider, if during winter there was nobody living at their home, would they consider renting their home out for a 3 or 4 month short-term lease? and they found that during in doing that, there was probably about, they said only a very small amount, but about half a dozen holiday homeowners that said that they wouldn't mind doing that because otherwise the house would be empty. And that was one idea that I thought maybe it might be worth us looking into to see whether or not with the rates notices we could be asking people who had empty houses that only came in at Christmas time or during the summer period if they would like to lease their house out. Obviously, they would want to see who was going to be renting it, but lots of ideas like that. So certainly, Councillor Karemba, I wouldn't want holiday homeowners to be worried that we were going to take their homes away from them and stop them from utilising their homes in the way that they would like to. But it's just looking at different ways that we may be able to, I suppose, look beyond the square at how we might be able to address some of the housing shortages in the area, even if it's just for a short time.
Okay, just a follow-up question then. If that's the case, should we be then looking at some of our rural residents and allowing them to have tiny homes put on these residents? Because I think that would be a more cost-effective way for people that are homeless, because I can't understand or get my head around how someone would be able to, who is homeless or potentially, can't afford a rental, would be able to afford market rates on Bridge Terrace or any of the other mega mansions that are empty most of the year down on the foreshore. But maybe I'll stand corrected. Maybe there is more money in the community than I know about.
No, you don't stand corrected. There's parts of the community that are doing it very tough, and certainly if you want to add that to the mix of different ideas that we can discuss, I would absolutely welcome it. Are there any more questions without notice? No. Well, we move on to motions on notice. Councillor Henderson has a motion on notice in relation to the Encounter Centre. As I'm chair of the Encounter Centre board, I have a conflict of interest, and so I'd ask Councillor Kemp to come forward and to chair this part of the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Jenkins, could I just ask a question of the CEO before you leave? Because you may not have to leave if the question is correct in my mind, or the answer is. The question is that this motion is part of a public unsolicited policy, which is still enacted at the moment. It's still going through, which is confidential. So would this motion on notice contravene the confidentiality of the unsolicited policy?
Through the Mayor, it's not confidential. So both the Biodiversity, Victor Harbour and the Encounter Centre sought approval or permission to release both of their unsolicited proposals from confidence, so it's not confidential.
Right, so 18.1 motion on notice Encounter Centre, Councillor Marilyn Henderson. Councillor Henderson, can you please move your motion?
Thank you. My motion is that Council commit a total of $60,000 in the 2024-25 annual budget to fund the Encounter Centre for a period of 12 months, and that the draft annual business plan and budget be adjusted accordingly, and that further feasibility investigation take place regarding a funding partnership and collaborative service arrangements with the Encounter Centre.
You can continue with your commentary if you like.
Okay, thank you. The community has been asking for a community centre for years, and here at last we have already made one. The Encounter Centre is the only dedicated community centre in our council area. It offers services and activities right from babies and toddlers through teens and young adults to some of our oldest and most vulnerable residents. It currently supports over 300 people per week, with potential to increase that level of support. Unfortunately, former income streams no longer provide enough income, and although the new board has a sound business plan, it's still in its early stages. They simply need a leg up at this time to give the business plan time to eventuate. They provide vital community services and are currently at risk of closure without funding. Whilst the Encounter Centre services differ from Council's community wellbeing services, they are very complementary to our community services from Council. Supporting the Encounter Centre would be of value to our whole community, and that's what Council is here to do. A funding partnership would be of mutual benefit to both the Encounter Centre and to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Now we've heard the motion and the commentary. I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Schofield, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Yes. Look, I totally agree. I did have the privilege quite a few years ago to volunteer at this centre when it was on the foreshore. And I was able to see firsthand the importance and the support that it gives to some of the members of our community. I think that for a 12-month period is a good thing, and perhaps we could have a look at a couple of other items in the budget and, you know, reduce those to make up for this one, because I think this is extremely important.
Thank you, Councillor, Mackenzie.
Yeah, I'm in support of this motion. The Encounter Centre does give our community a lot of services that we aren't able to provide, just capacity, and it would be a shame to lose that. And yeah, it has been running for so many years, and I know a lot of people really benefit from the services that they provide. So I'm more than happy to support this.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I'm very supportive of the Encounter Centre. I'm supportive of the need of this within Victor, and I didn't have any issues with the money or what was proposed. I was just concerned whether we would set a precedent for other organisations coming. And I know this is fairly unique. That was one part. The other is that the challenge that the centre have, from my understanding, and I haven't seen their business plan, I would like to actually see their business plan, is more around the management of the centre. They were impacted by the change in legislation. Instead of the centres being able to get the funding, it now goes to clients. And a lot of the clients have gone elsewhere, which has impacted them. And they need time to re-establish, and I understand that, and to refocus on opportunities to strengthen the services that they provide. I think council having a relationship is a good thing, because this is the sort of thing we should be spending money on. But I'm also conscious of, will other organisations now come for council contributions? So I'd like to see the business plan that was mentioned. I want to see what they're proposing to do and I think that's the second part of the motion, where we actually review that to have a look at it. I agree with that, but I need to be satisfied that they are actively working to address a lot of the issues. I know a bit about the history of what's occurred, and I think it's unfortunate. And the challenges they've got, they do need support, but I think a lot of it is they need some expertise to assist them and help them out, as well as funding. I don't think it's just funding as well. And it's unfortunate that the manager they had left, so that's put them in an additional challenging position. But, you know, it happens. The services and the people there are fantastic. Volunteers are fantastic as well. So I will be supporting this, but I do have some concerns, but I think that'll be addressed after where they actually look at what we do from an ongoing relationship.
Yes, Councillor Burns. Sorry, Councillor Karimba.
Just a couple of questions. The $60,000, is that to cover their rent? Is it to cover management? What do we know? Has that been identified, what the 60,000, or is it just a holistic 60,000 they need?
I'll get the CEO to answer your question.
If I refer back to the unsolicited, through the Deputy Mayor, if I refer back to the unsolicited proposal, they were seeking $60,000 for 3 years, and I believe it was just insistence to assist with the ongoing operations. It wasn't specific in regards to what it was for. They're actually within a state government building, so I'm not sure what their rent arrangements are. I don't think there are any, but I could be wrong. But it's more around their general operating and facility of their services.
Yeah. And so that 60,000, I mean, if it's not rent and if it's management, and I do understand, I think that the general manager is now left anyway. Nick Hales is not or will be leaving, and they've got someone else, have they? Or
They have, yes, you're correct. Nick Hales has resigned and left, and they have just appointed a new community centre manager.
okay. And so will we, obviously, this is a 12-month thing, so we'll see some, I guess, some financials or something to understand what this, because you know, in our financial management discussion, it's a risk assessment, it says medium because we're adding $30,000 to the 24-25 budget. So I just want to make sure that before we add that we actually do our due diligence, which is kind of what we should be doing.
Yeah, and that would be something you may want to look to include if council was to support including this provision and that contribution of $60,000 for the 12 months. That prior, obviously, to the issuing of that, you'd look for some terms and conditions or what you were looking for. And I believe that's the Councillor Henderson's intent, was to explore what that could be for that 12 months rather than committing to a 3-year commitment. Yeah, it was at least the 12 months. So
within that 12-month period, we will be setting those parameters, or is it let them run for 12 months and then we'll talk about the next 12 months?
Again, it's up to the chamber if you were to commit the 60, as we have with, for example, Business Victor Harbour, when they came and sought funds, the council had a funding agreement as to what its expectations were in terms of deliverables, which it put in place prior to issuing the funds, and then expected them to report back on what they were.
Okay, do we have to amend the motion for that to happen?
You may want to speak to the mover about whether you want to include you know, that the council prepared some parameters or an appropriate funding agreement to be put in place.
Yeah, I'd like to see if Councillor Henderson would be happy for that to happen.
Councillor, sorry, just finishing with the questions at the moment. Councillor Schiller.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask some questions prior to I'm happy to listen to what motion you'd like to put up, Carlos, but there's two separate components to this. We've got supporting an existing provider that is a very valuable service to our community, but part of the original unsolicited proposal had a lot to do with turning it into a community centre, and so we're just by having this block of $60,000 allocated at the moment, there isn't any clear direction as to where those funds are going to go, and I'm happy to, you know, commit that 60,000 once I've seen more detail of how it's going to be spent.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton.
Just had a couple of ones. There was an outstanding resolution that was raised on the 23rd of January last year regarding utilising the Encounter Centre community garden, and it still seems to be sitting in those outstanding resolutions. Do we have is there any more forward motion that's come about from that?
I'll ask the CEO to answer that.
Sorry, I'm just going to check the outstanding resolutions. I thought that was the unsolicited proposal.
I think they're separate things, but they kind of overlap because there was mention in Marilyn's motion about the community nursery and community garden within the Encounter Centre. So I just want to see where they're at.
Yeah, Jodie, would you like to add to that one? Because we have had discussions. It's actually combined with the biodiversity Victor Harbour's proposal around whether the co-location of the nursery and the community garden could be considered, but Jodie may wish to add to that one.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, it was a question that Councillor Burns asked earlier on, and there is a workshop scheduled for August about the location of one or both facilities.
The second part of my question was the budget workshop that we have next. I think it's next week, is it?
Wednesday.
I just feel like maybe this motion may be better to be pushed back until we've had the budget workshop because it's obviously very involved with that, and I think may also would that affect Marilyn's motion if we just delay it slightly?
Councillor Quinton, you want to move an adjournment motion of this motion so we can include the discussion in the Wednesday night workshop.
I would, as long as it's not going to affect Marilyn's motion.
Oh, I don't think it will affect because the budget hasn't been approved yet, and this is part of the budget approval process.
In that case, I think it makes sense to push it back until we've had the final budget workshop.
Okay, we just need a timeline as to when could we bring it back to chamber, or do we bring it back as part of the special council meeting for approving of the budget?
If Councillor Quinton's adjournment is to enable the matter to be discussed at the budget workshop and considered as part of the budget adoption, that would be enough because it would be covered.
All right, I'm seeking a seconder for the adjournment. Councillor Schiller. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried. All finished.
That was actually is quite relevant.
Yeah, but at the moment, sorry, Councillor Burns, the debate is now closed. Oh, sorry. You have a question on what other?
That separate from this submission, there is also a submission from the Encounter Centre to both Rotary Victor and Encounter Centre for funding as well. And the members need to be aware of that.
All right, thank you for that update. Finished that agenda item. I'll call the Mayor back into the chamber.
It is now, thank you very much, Councillor Kemp. It is now 8 o'clock, so we will take a 10-minute break and I'll see you all back here at 8:10 to go on with the next item. Thank you. elected members are back. All the administrative staff are back, so we might continue on. So we now come to motions without notice, and I believe, Michael Quinton, you have got one. You sent around to all the elected members earlier on today.
I did indeed. So it's pretty long, and I've emailed a copy to administrations, so it's up on the screen now. Basically, it's around providing a submission to the state government regarding the Dog and Cat Management Amendment Bill, which was, and the draft has been released, and it's just some feedback for that. So hopefully I don't have to read it all out, do I?
Are you all happy? So you can take that as read. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I think it's all pretty straightforward. It's basically just giving some feedback about how they could improve the act the bill to better encompass dog and cat management, which I think is becoming a growing issue with lots of councils. And I understand that other councils are providing similar feedback, which will be, add power to it. So I think it's important that Victor Harbor put in 2 bobs worth.
Thank you. Do I have somebody to second that motion? Councillor Henderson. Thank you. Do you want to speak to that? Does anybody else want to speak to it? Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I haven't had a chance to fully review and read it. I've only read part of it before coming here. Certainly agreeing with the first part in regard to the amount of dog breeders, especially that are just selling animals, and they end up with vets in the because owners are finding the dogs have got all sorts of health issues, and so certainly very supportive of that part. I haven't read through the full thing, so I'm probably not in a position to vote, but from what I've read so far has been quite interesting.
Would you like some time, Councillor Burns, to read it on the screen?
Yes, please, if I could.
I would have to come up and stand under the screen because I don't have my class.
Yep, I'm more than happy for you to do that. Do you want me to read it out?
I think you're better at reading.
Council supports in principle the Dog and Cat Management Breeder Reforms Amendment Bill 2024 in relation to changes that will improve breeding conditions for dogs in South Australia and provide customers with greater confidence that the pet they are purchasing has been bred safely and ethically. Stronger penalties for dog attacks to provide a stronger deterrent for irresponsible owners. Changes designed to help councils manage dogs better and facilitate better services for owners in the community, especially improvements to matters around council powers, including for seizure, detention, orders and enforcement. Point 2, that council makes the following comments in relation to areas of the bill that should be strengthened. The draft bill disappointingly does not result in a statewide consistency in relation to cat management, instead leaving regulation of cat management to local councils via bylaw mechanisms, which leads to inconsistency and confusion for communities. Second point, the draft bill does not appropriately address management of feral cats, nor the necessarily improvements to council powers for seizure and detention of cats. Third point, if councils have correct facilities, they will be better able to manage cats. Therefore, an appropriate amendment to the bill at section 26(1)(e) would be to include cats as indicated in bold font. Council should be responsible and make satisfactory arrangements for the detention of dogs and cats seized under this Act. Fourth point, sections 7 and 8 should be amended to include cats. This would then require effective control for both dogs and cats, and wandering at large provisions would also apply to both species. Council to provide the following further comments. Regulation of dog and cat breeding facilities should be centralised rather than adding a burden at local government level. This could be funded or part funded via the council's contribution from dog and cat breeder registration fees. The implementation of breeder reform should be accompanied by a comprehensive education and support program for breeders, including appropriate transitional arrangements. Careful consideration should be given to the process of regulating dog and cat breeding facilities, ensuring that a risk-based approach is applied and that the regulation does not result in an unreasonable burden for animal breeding businesses. The government should commit to statewide educational programs that support changing community expectations regarding effective dog management to reduce incidents of dog bite. The government should commit to statewide educational programs that support changing community expectations regarding roaming hats. Can we move to page 19, please? Feral cat management, while not applicable in its entirety to this piece of legislation, should be given further consideration and action taken at a state government level to address this growing statewide issue. It is a lost opportunity not to standardise cat registration across South Australia, as registration fees could be utilised to support the funding of feral cat and roaming cat management programs. Promotion of grant opportunities available to councils in supporting of roaming and feral cat management initiatives at a local level should be a priority of the government. This role should extend to supporting local governments to collaborate to extend the benefit across council boundaries in order to effectively address these issues. Would you like to speak to that further, Councillor Quinton? No? And we've got a seconder, sorry, was Councillor Henderson, that's right. Did you want to speak to this? No. And Councillor Schiller and then Councillor Karimba.
I just got a query about the component of centralising and then basically how administration could see that equity in fees coming back to councils with different council sizes. Anyone got any opinions on that?
Director Rokoczynski is currently our member on the Cat and Dog Management Board.
Thank you, through the Mayor. The way registration fees work currently is that council operates the DACO system, which is Dog and Cats Online. So pet owners can register themselves directly, and likewise breeders can. So it would seem relevant, as per Councillor Quinton's motion, that the fees obtained from breeder registrations could be collected and perhaps not returned to councils, but retained by state government through the DACO system. And that way it could go towards part funding or fully funding, depending on how the regulation of it is rolled out. That state government could perhaps employ a smaller number of people than we as individual councils might need to do when looking at the issue across the state, because not every council is going to have a significant number of breeders, and sometimes it's difficult to retain that expertise, and it's just another duty that our staff need to get trained and competent in undertaking, and it does reduce consistency if it's not done through a centralised way. You'll notice how diverse the role of our public safety officers is already, and it would be another element to their roles and responsibilities if it wasn't centralised. So I suppose that was the essence of Councillor Quinton's motion.
Councillor Karimba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. What is the definition of a breeder? Because is it someone that's registered to breed and sell dogs? Because obviously what happens in the case where a lot of people, you know, you see them online or through Facebook Marketplace and they're selling dogs. Is there a certain amount of litters, I guess, they can sell before they recognise as a breeder, or how is that sort of, I guess, administered, not administered, but sort of controlled, I guess?
Through the Mayor, there are some definitions within the legislation, but ultimately any persons with a dog that isn't desexed needs to register as a breeder, because a few years ago legislative reforms rolled out across South Australia required that all dogs needed to be desexed. So anybody who's not actually desexing their dog needs to register as a breeder. There's not to my knowledge, and I'm not couldn't to the letter of the legislation show you the definition, but that's the essence of it. And these reforms would be more specific around how it's regulated. So ideally not the same for somebody who hasn't desexed a single dog as opposed to requirements for somebody who's having up to the maximum which is being proposed, which is up to 50 breeding dogs.
Another question, Councillor Burns.
Just to say that I'm supportive of this. I was concerned when I read the original draft legislation, it didn't address feral cats, which I think is appropriate, but also anything that contains unregistered, illegal or excessive pet farming. I'm supportive of this because it seems to attempt to try and reduce that as well, which I'm supportive of.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Quinton, did you want to close the debate? Is there anything you want to say?
Just to add to that, recently at the previous amendment, actually, before the previous amendment, you were actually allowed to have an unlimited number of breeding animals. Whereas that reduction down to 50, it still seems like a lot because I think you'd struggle to actually manage 50 breeding dogs at a time. It's like you'd need a lot of staff to get that done, but it is a step in the right direction. It's still ideally should go a lot further, but yeah, it's a small win.
Yep. Thank you. I now put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. And thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Quinton. We now move on to the confidential items, and the first recommendation is that council go into confidence because the discussion might involve unreasonable disclosure of information concerning the person or affairs of the applicants in the detail who have applied to be on the Agribusiness Working Group, Art and Culture Advisory Group, Heritage Advisory Group, Boating and Marine Facilities Advisory Group. Would someone move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Seconding, Councillor Schiller. All those in favour? So all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Can I make a can I make a recommendation that we have our work experience student is allowed to, if he wishes? Can you put up your hand if you're happy for that to happen? Yep, thank you very much. Abby, you're more than welcome to stay. So just include that in the